Welcome to this presentation on creating successful parent-teacher meetings. This class has dealt with the creation of successful teams, and a lot of it has dealt with the roles of different team members and how to become a better listener. I think there are a lot of good reasons for this. By and large, we're better at stating our own mind than in listening to someone else's opinion. So I thought that if you're anything like me, that working on developing listening skills, so the Laugh, Don't Cry strategy, was a good place to start. However, clearly there are times when, as an education professional, you have important information that you need to share with a parent or perhaps a colleague. Sharing information is not very hard when it's good news, but it's a little more challenging when you need to share information that may be unknown to the parent. So, for example, that their child is acting inappropriately in class, or that's bad news, that their child is not making expected progress. Clearly, each situation is highly individualized and there's no simple formula. However, what I hope to do in this presentation is share some useful information on how to lay the groundwork for successful meetings with parents and other professionals, and some strategies for the meeting itself. In preparing this presentation, I looked at what experienced classroom teachers had to say, what parents had to say, even what children had to say. Some of you may remember parent-teacher conferences from your childhood. This is what one parent had to say about her memories. Parent-teacher conferences were times of great anxiety for me as a child. I sat at home with damp palms, waiting for my mother to return with the bad tidings. I'm not sure why I had such a guilty conscience. I was a good student and never had behavior problems. But the conference brought together the most powerful adults in my life, my parents and my teacher, to talk about me. The attention was unnerving. So clearly there's a lot of stress in the room, and when there's stress, a couple of things happen. One, we don't think as clearly, and may say things without really thinking through the consequences. Second, we tend to have poor memories of the details of conversations that are stressful. If any of you have ever been in the position of having a stressful conversation with a doctor or another professional, you may recall that you remember a particular phrase, but the details of what was agreed to, or next steps, are often hard to remember. I spoke earlier in this course about the importance of parents acting as advocates for their children and how we can help them become more comfortable with that role. If there's a child that's experiencing difficulty, it's nice to think that we'll all be solved with one meeting, but chances are that one way or another, parents are starting a long-term and hopefully intensive engagement with schools, and one of your major goals is setting a positive, productive tone. So we're trying to think how we can help parents have realistic goals for their children, know how to advocate for their children, and know how to work productively with the education system. So we're trying to think about all the things that we can do so that when issues arise, we have a firm foundation for working with parents. And one way to do that is by thinking about a strategy that we discussed earlier. So the POET strategy refers to things we can do as teachers to establish a positive rapport with parents. And there's four big ideas. First, that in our communication we're working to be positive, so to catch people in a sense being good. Communication should be ongoing, so we want to be reporting the good times and the bad on a regular basis. We want our communication to be early, so we're trying to make contact before things go wrong, hopefully with some good news. And finally, the communication should be trusted, so in everything we do, we need to respect the confidentiality. Implementation of the POET strategy will look different when working with children in elementary school or secondary school, but basically we're trying to think of ways that we can help parents see teachers and the schools as trusted, positive sources of information. And to the extent that we think we need to talk to parents about special services for a child, we can start to educate parents about academic goals and typical classroom performance. We often hear about parents that do not come to parent meetings or IEP meetings, and clearly getting parents involved and keeping them involved can be a challenging and even frustrating process. Nothing's going to work with everyone, but we can be fairly sure that if the only time parents hear from teachers is when things are going wrong, or to ask them to meetings that they may perceive as confrontational, it becomes tempting not to want to hear from teachers anymore. So this strategy emphasizes trying to get in early with some positive information so that if or when things go wrong later on, you have a positive foundation from which to work. Okay, so with respect to communication strategies, we're trying to make sure that the first news is good news. That may be a letter of introduction that goes out over the summer that focuses on the teacher's excitement about teaching. This might include a brief introduction, goals for the class, teaching philosophy, contact information, expectations for communication, information about parent nights, classroom visits, email address. At a middle school or secondary level, it may be more appropriate to have a personal web page. I know as a parent that I always look for, and I'm impressed by, teachers that have taken the time to create a web page that helps parents put a face to a teacher's name and learn a little more about the teachers with whom their children will be spending their days. Will every parent look at this? Probably not, but a surprising number will, and there's nothing wrong with strengthening ties to parents that are already engaged. Again, all you can do is try things that have a high chance of supporting success and hope that these approaches make your life more positive and reduce the number of challenges that you face. Even if you have serious concerns about a child's academic performance in the very beginning, work to find something to praise in the child's work or behavior and share this with the parent. At a minimum, try and communicate something positive about the entire class so that you can set the tone that you're essentially a positive person. If there is bad news later, we know that it's going to be a natural reaction for the recipient to want to deny that bad news. To the extent that you're known as someone who's essentially positive, it may help parents to move more quickly into a stage where they're starting to deal with the issue. To the extent that you are an unknown or even viewed as negative, a parent may spend a lot of time believing that the problem is all in the teacher's mind. At middle school and high school, if you know that each year you may need to talk to a parent about extra help for a child, one way to help them learn about typical performance is to share information about how the typical child in your class is performing on an ongoing basis. Again, the first contact should not be, your child got a D and the class average was a B, so try to make sure that there are some positive messages about class goals or student participation, so the first message is not bad news. But ongoing information on class expectations can be very useful, especially if you know or feel you're going to need a conversation about seeking additional support or additional services for a child. Again, some other ways of ensuring ongoing and trusted communication include the use of letters and feedback on homework, sharing contact information, email addresses, and parent nights. If you are anticipating a meeting with parents, whether to share good news or concerns or a mixture, it can be very helpful to share with parents your goals for the meeting and your sense of the structure, planned structure for the meeting. So some teachers provide fairly detailed information about the goals and structure of parent-teacher nights. One useful step in this process can be to ask parents to consider and ideally write down beforehand some of the key information that they'll be asked to discuss at the conference. That helps the parents better understand your expectations and will also give them more confidence in their expected role. Because they've had more time to think about your questions, you will probably get better quality information than if you simply ask at the meeting. There are a range of questions that can be considered for inclusion in the planning form. I have listed some typical questions in the PowerPoint slide. So they could be asked to provide information about the child's interests, the child's strengths, challenges for the child, maybe describe their ideas about the times when their child learns best or the supports that help their child learn best, some of the parents' goals for education, other information that you might be interested in asking about. If you'd like to see an example of a parent-teacher form, please go to the link in the PowerPoint slide. This is also provided at the Angel website. So again, before the conference, we're not only thinking about what information we want to share about the child, but we're also trying to think about how we can use the meeting as an opportunity to get the parents more involved on a long-term basis in working with their child and working with the school system. And by asking the parents to really think about what they see as strengths and challenges, we get new information, learn how they see the information, and hopefully we get a good start on a productive dialogue with parents. It's not unusual that kids who have had difficulty at school had parents who had difficulty at school as well. And those parents may not have especially fond memories of school. It may take a certain amount of courage for them to return to school and get involved in teacher-parent meetings, so we want them to feel positively about their contributions and try to build their esteem as parents. And I've identified some ways that we try to do that, getting the parents talking about their concerns and trying to fairly quickly move into taking action and recording the impact of that action. Many teachers find it's helpful to have a regular structure to the meeting, so some steps that many teachers include are a brief introduction to the class and the routine of the class, so some of the goals, samples of student work, positive information about what's going on. Also, towards the beginning, it's a good idea to review the information that the parents provided, confirm the shared positives. So if the parents see things and you see things that are both good and are the same, to comment on that, and also to comment on the extent to which you share goals for the child. Once you've had a chance to share some general information about the class and reviewed the information that the parents have provided, it's a good time to start moving into the stage where you're going to try to work the conversation around to some of the things that you view as a concern, and this is where I would suggest the use of the do-it problem-solving strategy. The do-it problem-solving strategy is a 5-step problem-solving strategy. It's been used by teachers and professionals from a wide variety of backgrounds. It's also a problem-solving strategy that has been successfully taught to both general education students and students with disabilities. So it's a good all-purpose strategy that you can use in a variety of ways. I found it very useful in working with teams and as a way of ensuring that there's cohesion around the goals and then providing feedback on progress towards those goals. So it's a 5-step strategy. First step is to describe the goals of key individuals. So to try and get a better sense of what are the behaviors that we want to increase, what are the behaviors that we want to decrease, and to always keep thinking about how will life be better if this goal is reached. Often it's fairly easy to think of all sorts of things we'd like to see changed, but to really think about what meaningful impact would we expect this change in this behavior to have. Once you've identified some of the key goals, start to think about lots of different ways to reach those goals. And again, this is a brainstorming stage where you're just trying to think about what are all the different ways that we could try to make progress towards the achievement of these goals. Third step is to identify the needed resources and the expected impact of some of those different approaches. So to think through, if we want to try and address this goal in a particular way, what are some of the resources that we would need in order to be able to do that? The fourth step is to pick an approach towards achievement of the goal, and then to evaluate the progress being made, so that as we try a particular approach, are we getting closer in achieving our goal? And finally, once the goal has been achieved, to celebrate success and share the information of that success with others. I thought it might be helpful to discuss this strategy in the context of a short case scenario. So, let's pretend you're a teacher at a new school. The school district has families from a wide variety of linguistic backgrounds and economic levels, and you've been told that it can be challenging to work with parents. You're concerned about Mark, a new transfer student in your grade 6 science class. When asked to take notes from a text for homework, his summaries typically contain at least one misspelled word in each sentence, the handwriting is poor, and the summaries are very disorganized. His grades on tests are very poor. The parent-teacher planning form that Mark's parents brought to the parent-teacher meeting was only partly completed. The handwriting was poor and contained misspellings. Their academic goal for Mark was to graduate high school. Okay, so in starting the meeting, we want to remember some of the ideas from poets. So thank them for coming in, bringing the form. reviewing the information and highlighting the positives. It might also be useful to ask some easy questions to get the conversation going. So, for example, the differences between the new school and Mark's old school with respect to the size of the school, transportation. This is not, to be honest, information you're really especially interested in to some extent, or that's especially important. All you're trying to do is ask some easy questions that will be easy for them to answer and just get everyone a little more comfortable with the conversation going back and forth. Okay, so after the basic introduction, we now move on to actually implementing the steps of the Do-It strategy. And the first step is to describe the goals of key individuals. So in a sense, we have two sets of goals we're concerned with here. The first are the goals for Mark. So with respect to the behaviors that we want to increase, we want him to demonstrate a better understanding of the content, probably principally a better performance on tests. At the same time, we also have goals for the parents. Now, we probably won't discuss these out loud, but we would like them to have a better understanding of where Mark is in terms of his current performance and performance needed to be successful in school. We would also hope that they would learn some strategies to support his success, and also really that they would increase their belief in their ability to support Mark so they can become better supports and advocates long term. In a sense, we're trying to increase their motivation, and motivation has two parts. People have to believe that something is worth doing, and they also have to believe that something can be done, that they can be effective in achieving change. Mark's parents may want him to do better in school, and we need to help them believe that they actually can help him do better in school. So again, as part of the Do-It strategy, we always want to think about how will life be better if these goals are reached. In the case of the goals we've identified here, if the student's more successful in school, he's got a better chance of graduating and graduates high school. He has more opportunities after high school, better opportunities for better jobs. Also, if the parents become better advocates, the long-term outlook for Mark is certainly brighter. To the extent that parents are positively engaged with schools, there's a higher chance that a student will do well and graduate. I'd like to just stop for a moment and talk a little bit about the difference between goals and activities. The reason I distinguish between goals and activities is because it's very important to get agreement on goals before moving forward to identifying what activities might be used to pursue those goals. There are a lot of different activities which can be used to reach goals. In Mark's case, if we sort of confuse goals and activities, we might say that our goal is producing neat notes or doing half an hour of homework a night at home. Maybe that will be our best solution, but it may also be that the best way for him to get a better understanding of the content is by working with a partner at school during study hall, or write out 3 questions at school, read the chapter at night, and then answer those questions orally in class the next day. The goal is that he understand the content, and we can reach that goal in a lot of different ways. When I have taught this strategy in the past, I think the biggest challenge for people has been to step back and say, what's the goal here? What's most important? And then remaining open to achieving that goal in a lot of different ways. If we confuse goals and activities, we can get locked in too quickly on one particular approach and not really consider the broad variety of ways that we might be able to achieve a goal.
Clearly, the challenge of these meetings is not so much when people agree on the issues coming into the meeting. The problem is when one side sees a problem the other is not aware of or does not believe is an issue. This may be related to different behaviors being seen at school than are seen at home. So there may be aggressive behavior that's seen at school that's not seen in the neighborhood. There may also be different standards for behavior. So parents may accept behaviors in the home that teachers find problematic at school. Parents may also not be aware of how high academic standards are in some content areas. We have emphasized that we want to listen to parents and be aware of their concerns and beliefs, and that's true. There are also times, however, when we need to take steps as teachers to ensure that we have a classroom that's a positive learning environment for everyone and that students get the academic help they need. So what I have seen work well in the past in these situations is trying to frame the goal in terms of something positive. So If you have a student, for example, who's aggressive, the goal is that the classroom is a positive, safe place for everyone. If the parents are unaware of their child's behavior, or if they don't accept your personal description of the behavior, this is the time to document what you have seen and to substantiate what you have seen by getting other people to contribute. If the problem is academic, the groundwork you have laid earlier with evidence of typical performance will be helpful if you need to emphasize that a child's performance is such that additional attention is needed. Ideally, you would also have some informal evidence that the kind of intervention you will be proposing could be useful. Again, hopefully by this stage there's been enough positive communication on other topics that you will be a trusted source of information. If you need parent buy-in to the program, and clearly ideally there's always parent buy-in, there's no sense moving forward to talking about interventions until you have agreement on the goal and the need for intervention. Some teachers even talk about completing behavior checklists with parents, or doing side-by-side comparisons of a student's academic work with that of peers, so parents can get a better understanding of teacher concerns. Clearly, this is a delicate situation because you're not trying to argue that you're always right or that yours is the only way. So if you anticipate problems, it's extremely helpful to have someone else who has a positive relationship with the parent be present at the meetings to substantiate what you're saying. If the parents vigorously deny the problem or are strongly opposed to any action being taken, consider proposing that everyone take a week to gather more information and meet again. This is not an alternative if the student is doing harm to himself or others, but if the concern is academic and not a crisis, going slowly may help everyone in the long run. Again, we know that a common first reaction to bad news is denial, and people need time to integrate information. Giving parents a week provides you with time to gather more information, and if your news is truly surprising, it gives parents time to think about what you've said. In these situations, we try to remember that the goal is partly to get agreement on this issue, but also to maintain a positive relationship, and by allowing everyone to step back and catch their breath, it may make it easier to move forward. By keeping the focus on a positive goal, it may help parents to accept a need for intervention in a specific area. Parents may be resistant to their child being considered for a disability label, but accept the need for intervention in a specific area. So it's a good idea to talk about positive goals related to specific behaviors rather than this is what we do for children with this disability.
Okay, so once we've done a good job describing our goal, our next step is to outline lots of different ways to reach that goal. And essentially what we're trying to do here is just encourage brainstorming about what are some things that might help. So again, it's great if we can work from parent suggestions of when the child learns best. So, maybe they talk about things like him having a quiet place to work, or that he does small chunks of work at a time, so a little each night rather than trying to cram on weekends. That's a good time for the teacher to throw forward some ideas. Maybe they can teach note-taking and summarization strategies. Maybe there's some peer practice activities that can take place within school. A logical question is this whole process going to take longer than the teacher simply saying, this is what I think we should do? Well, the answer is yes. It's going to take longer, certainly in the short term. However, in the long term, if one of our goals is to get parents to buy in and follow through, a little extra time here in listening to their ideas and working through some of those ideas may make a lot of difference in terms of what happens next. It may mean better parent buy-in. It may mean that parents are more likely to come to meetings in the future if they know that their ideas will be listened to and discussed. I know that when I meet with someone and I feel like they really haven't listened to me, I'm not especially interested in what they want to tell me to do. So again, if we're trying to get parents more engaged, I think it's very useful to show that we honestly want to listen to their ideas and think through the implications and consider them on an equal basis with some of the ideas that we're interested in. Okay, the next step is to look at the different ideas that have been suggested and identify the needed resources and expected impact of taking those different approaches. So, what do we need to do this, and what's the likelihood that we'll be able to get those needed resources? So, creating quiet. Well, chances are, if their house is like my house, it's going to be difficult to have absolute quiet if there's lots of kids running around. But, our earplug's a possibility. With respect to working in small chunks of time, would it be useful to create a study chart that could be used so that Mark could see the expectations and can see his progress in meeting those expectations. With respect to a summarization strategy, it might be useful for the teacher to actually write out a contract and make a commitment of their willingness to teach it, and ask Mark to sign and demonstrate that he's going to make a commitment to learning it. And again, as we come up with the needed resources, to also thinking about what are some of the expected outcomes if we follow through on these different things. One of the nice things about working through in this way is that parents can actually see the process that teachers go through in trying to think about, what's going to give us the most impact in terms of effort in a particular area. After you have a sense of the resources that are needed and the impact of the different approaches, it's time to take action. So to pick an approach, or maybe multiple approaches if there's resources available, and evaluate progress towards the goal. So perhaps in this case with Mark, create the study chart with a checklist, and that's something the teacher could look after and furnish to the parent, and it will be the parent's responsibility with Mark to indicate on the study chart each night what had been achieved. With respect to data, in this case we might track how often he's successful in making notes, also track his quiz scores. And working from this data, we can either decide that the intervention's been powerful enough and led to the hoped for change with grades, or that more changes are needed. But, what comes after the meeting is as important, maybe more important than what happens at the meeting. We need to make sure there's some way to check to make sure that the work is actually taking place, and to measure the impact of the work on helping with the long-term goal. Ideally, the communication about this progress, again, is positive, ongoing, and trusted. So in this case, as the study chart goes back and forth to compliment the parents on the work that they're doing and keeping it completed, to compliment Mark on, persisting with the program and just reinforcing for him the impact, positive impact that it's having with his grades. Students and parents of students that have a history of academic struggles may have doubts about their ability to positively impact grades, so to do things that will result in improved performance. So when things do go well, and hopefully they will as a result of this program, it's really important to celebrate success. One of the things we know about very busy people is it's easy for them to get caught up in just putting out the next fire and not stopping to celebrate when success does occur. So I would strongly encourage you to watch for success and to celebrate that success, and when it happens, to really emphasize the importance of personal effort. So to reflect back to Mark and to the parents, the positive impact of the extra work that they've done, and what that has meant in terms of Mark's understanding of the content, Mark's grades, and what this means for Mark's future. So helping them see that their behavior is important and is having a positive impact. So again, in this brief presentation, I've discussed two strategies that I hope you find to be useful in working with parents. I've talked about the POET strategy, so that we're trying to be, in our communication with parents, be positive, ongoing, early, and trusted. And I've talked about the use of the do-it problem-solving strategy, so that we try and implement an organized way of dealing with problems or addressing goals, in which we try and clearly identify the goal that we're addressing, look at lots of different ways of addressing that goal, working towards that goal, systematically identifying the best choice, taking action and measuring progress towards that goal, making changes as needed, and finally celebrating success when the goal is achieved, and sharing the news of that success with other individuals. So are the use of strategies like this easy, or are they faster? And the honest answer is no. In working with parents and working with colleagues, other teachers, paraprofessionals, I can't argue that it's always going to be faster to take the time to implement some of these communication strategies and problem-solving strategies, especially in the short term. But I would argue that in the long term, they lay the foundation for positive relationships in the future, chances are you're going to be busy as a teacher, and if you're going to be busy, you might as well be busy doing positive things that you're excited about, rather than preparing for high-stress meetings. So while it does take time to implement these strategies, hopefully it's a positive reinforcing time for you, and it's certainly been my experience and the experience of others that time spent with these types of approaches can also reduce the amount of time you spend in high-stress meetings and dealing with problems. So I hope you find these approaches of interest, and thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you.